Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's RD2RD Live Show. My name is Megan Boitano, and I'm joined by Dina D'Alessandro, and we are talking about working with students. Really diving into our role as a dietitian, as a preceptor, and really breaking down some of the kind of everyday tasks that it takes to be a good preceptor, but also kind of a larger global look at staying organized and what are the opportunities in my business. Or if you work at an institution, kind of how some tips and approaches to being more organized and providing a better experience for students and interns. And as I was preparing for this live broadcast, I was reflecting back on my own preceptors as many years ago, right? For me now, more than 15 years ago. But I have such the memories of those very specific preceptors who really impacted my career, who really went out of their way to really shape me into the dietitian that I am today. I feel so passionate about our role to give back to students and take them in our practice or in our clinical setting or wherever we are, that it's part of how we got where we are. So, giving that back to students. So I know Dina feels a lot of the same way about this topic, and I kind of stalk her on social media as well as in Facebook groups, because anytime there's a question about taking students, she really chimes in with a great amount of information. And so she's been on my list for a while to reach out to have on the show. And I was so excited when she said yes and taking time out of her busy schedule to join us today. So long-winded introduction, but Dina, thank you so much for being here today. I know live video can be a little intimidating, but I'm so glad that you're here. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your not so traditional career, and we'll kind of dive in from there.
So thank you so much for having me. So I am a second career dietitian. I like to joke that I started with my Bachelor of Arts and Communication back in the early 1800s. And then at some point about 6 or so years ago, I decided to change career paths. And so, as a lot of us in this field, I had my own health issues and concerns and dealing with some family issues as well. And I started thinking about that role. And I had always been really interested in nutrition and culinary stuff. And so, I don't know, I just pursued the RD profession, not having known anything about it. So I went from a BA in communication to an MS in nutrition, and then, had to obviously come into learning all this new information on there. And so I'm a second career. I'm an older person, right? So when I was in school, I was about twice the age of everyone else that was there at the time, for the most part. And I really kind of grabbed onto everything and just hit the ground running, because I felt like if I took the more traditional approach, I was going to be like a million years old and just, not being able to maybe keep up, or at least knowing myself and my own energy. So I tried to hit the ground running as soon as I got the credential, and quite literally immediately put myself on the list for precepting, and just thought, what can I offer people in what I'm doing then? And then, as you might have been, keeping track of me in the past 3.5 years or so that I've been a dietitian, there's been a lot of things that I'm doing and still continue to do, and a lot of different things that have changed over the course of the last few years. So I enjoyed the experience. At some point I might just pick one thing and just write it out, but right now it's a lot. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, no, I think we were kind of chatting beforehand. When we think about being a dietitian and we think about having a business, most of the time it's, well, we have to do, private practice, and which I think is funny, because in 2020, I've decided that I'm focusing my efforts on RD2RD, and really that ultimately a lot of times you figure that isn't the best fit for us. And we were chatting about the other things that you're doing, that our career continues to evolve and we discover what is really a good fit. So I always love hearing the stories of people who come on the show, because it always challenges our thoughts about what box we have to fit into as typical dietitians. Well, I have to know, or I have to make this decision, and that it really doesn't work that way.
Yeah. I mean, I've been very fortunate that a lot of the opportunities that have come my way, and I do share this a lot with everybody, I don't think I've actually looked for a job, like actually looked on a website and applied for something in 20 years. thankfully word of mouth gets around, or, as a lot of us tend to do, we have that nice abundance mindset where if we open up to opportunities and we share information with people and we say, I'm looking for something, or I'm really interested in something, things fall on our laps. And so that's kind of been my life in the last few years, where I'm like, too many things are happening at once where I can't keep up. So I'm trying to chip away at some things that are spreading me a little bit thin. And then also seeing like organically how I feel comfortable. So for me, the private that I started a few years ago, and I was working one-on-one, I was dealing with out of pocket, self-pay people, very few. But then things just kind of moved in different directions. I did corporate wellness, I did some community things, and I actually started getting a little bit disheartened with the one-on-one counseling thing. So until I kind of feel okay with going back in there, I'm allowing other things to kind of happen. And so in that is kind of a neat opportunity to share with students and interns that, again, aren't necessarily looking for a traditional role or just interested to see what might be out there.
Yeah, what else there is. So
Yeah.
give us a little bit of background about working with students, because how did this happen for you, and what ways, like, just talk to us about it.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is, and again, I'm not entirely sure if 3 years ago this was the case, but I was looking to see what do you need to do to become a preceptor? Because I always really love giving back. And I thought, as I'm learning, I could also share this with people. And as you said before, based on my own internship experience, there were some things where I'm like, oh my gosh, absolutely, would I never do that again? Or I want to make sure that I'm not that person to someone who is working with me. And I wanted to uh, allow the student or the intern to see that there is a nurturing experience. There's a place here to learn a lot of different skills that you don't necessarily get in school. So I first just, Googled like, how do you become a preceptor? And I'll share with you guys some of the things on my screen in a bit that I just got on the database. I looked up, according to a few years ago, you didn't necessarily have to have any kind of years under your belt, or at least no one's checking on that. So I just put my name on the database and I started receiving emails and contacts from different people. And I also, which again, you might ask me a little bit to clarify this later on too, but I got in touch with programs too. I got in touch with my own school. I was like, I'm looking to start practice, and I'm just looking to see if there's anybody who's interested in volunteering or interning with me unofficially outside of the dietetic internship role. And so I will say within the past 3.5 years, I've had what is close to 60 students.
Wow.
Like the majority, like 40 of them or so, have been just dribs and drabs of like volunteers here and there, or like mentoring kind of relationships. And then I'm up to my 21st dietetic intern right now.
Wow.
So that's a lot. Yeah. I mean, keep in mind, I don't get them assigned for, 16 weeks on end. So I go through kind of regularly, but it really offers a great experience and opportunity for both of us. Like, I really do believe in a mutually beneficial relationship that happens, as I progress and get older, and I have like more newer, younger interns coming in my way, that they share their information of what they're learning and they keep me current as well.
Yeah. So let's you mentioned getting on this database.
Yeah.
And then talking about, as a former clinical manager, we took a number of distance interns, but for your more clinical rotation, maybe it's 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, especially with the increase in distance internship programs, where these students are required to, of course, set up all of their rotations in advance of applying. It's very intense for the student. Now, talk to me about the types of rotation, because a lot of times a student will have a 2-week elective, or where the objectives might be more malleable, right? More flexible to fit in. What type of experience are you offering these interns versus, of course, students, which we can maybe differentiate those two things a little bit?
Yeah. So that is a good point, in the sense of, obviously, when they're doing their dietetic internship, they're reaching out before they've even gotten matched. So depending on what the program is that they're looking to get, if I'm familiar with that program, or if they can give me a link to that program's internship website, that I can see what the rotations are. I won't qualify for everything. Obviously, I don't qualify for like inpatient MNT stuff. I might qualify for some outpatient stuff, because I do one-on-one counseling in prenatal. I do one-on-one counseling on my own, or I used to do one-on-one counseling on my own. And so depending on where I was in that particular quarter or that year, then that would depend on what I could satisfy. And then the other thing I make sure I do is, if I have the opportunity, or I know the director already, I'll reach out and introduce myself and say, put me on the list. I'm free to, and again, I'll share this with you guys in a sec, but I've put together an actual schedule of what a day in the life of me looks like during any given week at the certain time. And then I've actually taken it upon myself to look up the ASEND or the CDR, like the competencies of what I could potentially offer somebody. So you're right. Some of the programs like distance DIs and even some of the more traditional ones, they have these little subcategories of like within community. And that's usually where I fit in, because I've done CDC facilitations of the Prevent Type 2 weekly workshops with a group setting. So that's considered a community education thing.
And I think, this is really important that
Yeah.
we always talk about using the language of the person we're trying to communicate with. And by looking at your day in the life or what you do on a daily basis and really translating that into the objectives, which is the language that dietetic internship directors speak and that students are looking to check off. So we may say, well, I do this, I do that, but that's kind of falling on deaf ears when they're like, I have to check off, my interns need X, Y, and Z. So I think it's a really good point. And I hope we'll talk about kind of how that might look of how do I figure that out? Like what objectives I'd be
exactly. I can say I'll satisfy these few things if you're open to it, or depending on how flexible or how strict the program is. And again, understanding that in a normal traditional community rotation, that could be like 8 weeks or 10 weeks, depending on the program, then maybe I only come in for 2 weeks or 4 weeks to give them a little taste of something, of somebody who is kind of starting off and in a very tight neighborhood setting, versus say working with a community health center, which is, a structured facility organization with an organizational chart and all the different players of there, versus just me, one person running my own show. Yeah.
Right. No, I think that it also probably improves efficiency quite a bit, so that if you're able to provide this list of what objectives you might need, it helps to weed out people. It's more efficient in that conversation with, is this a good fit? Do you find that that's true?
Yeah. So if I'm contacted directly by the intern who's looking for a distance DI to secure that, I will make sure I get their resume. I'll make sure I see if I understand what their program requires. And I'll always schedule a phone conversation with them to get to know them a little bit better. And because a lot of my stuff is work from home, or I have different neighborhoods where I travel, I do try to ask them, where are you coming from? Where do you live? Do you mind going back and forth? Are you allergic to cats? Because I have a cat, so if we're working in my apartment, I want to make sure we're a good fit. And that I'll be able to satisfy what they're looking for, so that, because again, they're coming perhaps from a green side as well, that they don't even know what they're reading and what that translates to. So I can say, based on my own experience, this is what your program will be looking for, and this is what I can do to supply that to you, but I will not be able to satisfy these particular things. So be sure you check with your director, before committing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of go into this general process of when a student reaches out to you, because there's that kind of gray area between I'm talking to the student, but there's also that dietetic, the internship, or if it's an academic, like part of, they're not actually an intern yet.
Right.
What elements, like advice in this process, do you work just directly with the student? At what point do you, maybe reach out to the internship director? Talk to us about your process. Maybe kind of, maybe a little bit more, not start to finish, but so that we can kind of put all those pieces together.
So if we're talking just like nutrition undergrad students who are just looking to get some experience under their belt, and again, I think I mentioned to you in our previous discussion that there are some labor laws. So this is more if like you're working in a particular environment where you're bringing people on to work as volunteers for 40 hours a week, and you're treating them like they're employees, but you're not paying them like their employees. That's a whole different thing.
Yeah. We're not lawyers here. Yeah. We're just, making sure that you understand that
that's not what we're doing.
You need to make sure you're,
check with your state. Right, exactly. I'm talking about students who are like, I want to get a feel for whatever, or I saw you online, or I teach at a campus here, so in New York City. So a lot of them know me as their teacher, and I give them backgrounds and stuff. And they're like, let me know if there's anything that I can do, just like assist you with stuff. So we're talking maybe 2 to 4 hours a week of just plugging things in. And so some of that can be done face to face. Some of that can be done virtually, depending on if I'm giving them needs assessments to share with, or community health profiles, because I'm trying to create a community workshop of some sort. So we're picking like an awareness program to put into place. So they're at the very early stages of that, or I'm asking their help in the creative way of like maybe helping with marketing materials and some graphic stuff, whatever they feel comfortable doing and learning. And again, it's a lot more fluid because we don't have to satisfy a competency there. It's just for them to kind of say they did something. I also tend to say, like, depending on the time that they're with me and how long they can be with me, if I can take them to things, like if I'm going to a conference or if I'm going to a networking group, whether it's day, night, or on the weekends, if it works with their schedule, then I'll offer that up to them as well. I do this with dietetic interns as well, but for nutrition students, I always try my best to reimburse them for travel within reason. The New York subway system is a lot cheaper than, say, like the Metro North trains are. So if they can travel within the boroughs, I'll reimburse them for their round trip. And I will always offer food to everybody. So I'll either feed them or treat them to lunch. And so at least I feel in that way I'm compensating them in some way, for their time and for their energy.
Right.
So does that answer the question as far as just like the nutrition students? As far as getting them, right? So I have a lot of listservs that I'm on here, as I mentioned before, because I'm related very closely to my own campus. And this is where I've graduated with my master's degree. And I actually work on campus now too. I'll put email blasts out, not just to my own student classes, like the student roster, but I'll also send it to the director. So like whoever the dietetics director is, or the health science department director is of these different schools, I'll just blast out like a little flyer saying I'm looking for, a volunteer one or 2 days a week or whatever. That was at the time. Now I'm inundated more with being assigned dietetic interns. So I don't really have a lot of need just yet for like the non-intern student. But back then I did. Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of transitioning a little bit more into taking the interns from your perspective, what do you see as kind of the, pros and cons of, more of an intern versus a student? Just kind of curious to hear your thoughts.
I think with anything, you're managing a human, right? That's human resources. So it's not just about throwing them some stuff and just be like, here, work on this because I don't have time to do that. It's really about giving quality to them. But then you yourself have to make sure that you're managing and overseeing, did they do what I ask them to do? Because especially if you're working kind of off-site from each other, are they abiding by some sort of structure?
So what does that look like for you? Like, is there a daily check-in meeting? Do you give them, is a lot of email back and forth? Do you do a little video chat? Talk to me about what works for you and maybe what hasn't, like what you learned along the way. Like, oh, that wasn't so good.
So a little bit of everything. When I first started, I was doing a Google Drive doc of like a spreadsheet with tasks, and they would they like clock in, clock out. So they'd punch in their hours and kind of track that, which is very helpful because, just as a side note, at the end of my relationship with them, if I'm giving them letters of recommendation, it's nice to go back and go, oh, she put in 100 hours worth of something, or she was assigned to me, or he was assigned to me for something. So I used to do that. I don't do that anymore. It's a lot of stuff. But so I will every week. For the week following, I'll put down, here's your schedule and here are the tasks or tasks to be determined. And then I usually have Google Drives where I stash all of my stuff. So there'll be downloadable materials or spreadsheets where I want them to look at and they can fill in. I try my best to give as much instruction as possible. So if we are not necessarily working side by side, that if I'm not available, they just read through the instructions and they'll know exactly what to do. And then I do request at the end of every day around 4 o'clock or so, regardless of who's done with what, just send me a quick status update. And then over the course of the day, obviously, if any questions or issues come up, you can text, you can email me. And, when I get breaks, I'll take a look. But that's also something too, Megan, just as an FYI, not every dietetic internship director will be okay with virtual work. So
that's a really good point.
Yeah, you want to make sure that you clear that with people because it is supervised practice. And if I'm not actually overseeing somebody, is that going to be an issue? But I'm very hands-on even when I'm not physically there.
Right. And I think in this, modern day and age with so many people working remotely, I could see how maybe there are some, and I don't know what the strict policy of the academy, if it says it has to be in person, but so it's kind of an internship director call or okay.
Yeah. And I mean, I definitely would say that too, because as long as it's about satisfying the competencies and making sure that, ultimately you're preparing the intern specifically for the RD exam, right? You want them to be good at what they are going to do to pass this exam. So as long as there's some sort of satisfying of whatever their competency there is, then I've often said it seems so silly to sit side by side with somebody who, has to travel an hour to get to my apartment just to work on her computer. I would rather just you save the time, work in the comfort of your own home. And then in those cases, what I'll do sometimes, like especially if I'm working and I know I have a break, like at 10:30 a.m. or 2:30 p.m., we'll do a Zoom meeting. A real
Got it.
quick, let's face to face, let's just chat a little bit so I can see your face and check in with you and you can see my face. And we do regular check-ins like that. So usually 3 days out of the week, if I'm working like I am now, where I have all these random jobs that I'm doing, 3 days out of the week will be work from home. 2 days out of the week will be in person, or at my altar, 3 days in person, 2 days at home.
Mm-hmm. So you talked a lot about finding students, and this I'd like to dive a little bit more into the selection process, because I
Okay.
think there's either this, you get inundated with requests, you have more than you can take in it, or it becomes really time consuming, right? To follow up by email and then do a phone screen. At some point you're like, ugh, I don't feel like I have the time. What have you
Yeah.
learned, or what's your process and maybe tips for efficiency around that when I get a request, that's review, selection, all that?
Well, it helps if you yourself are good with systems and organization in general. So for me, everything I have, hopes, dreams, et cetera, everything is plugged into my calendar. So at any given time, I can say, oh yes, this is a quarter or a month that I'm going to be working on whatever. This is when I'm going to be traveling and I cannot deal with anything because I don't want to be away too long when I'm assigned an intern. And then for me, especially since I'm just a one person show, I don't take on more than one intern at a time. The volunteers were a little bit different because, somebody would come in on like a Tuesday from 2 to 4. Another person would only be able to do Fridays. That's a different story. But even then, that can be a little bit overwhelming. So I've kind of limited myself to one person at a time. I definitely don't like anything less than 2 weeks because I mean, by the time, right, with work from home and then not work from home, by the time I see you, you're done. We haven't really accomplished anything. So I try to make sure there's at least some structure to that. And then in advance, with planning of things, monthly things that I know that I'm going to be contracted out for or that I'm working on myself, I'm like, oh my gosh, you would be perfect for this particular thing that I'm doing. Some programs also, like I said, they have the explanation of what their rotation entails, or if it's an elective of what you're looking for. So I fit that in too. So if there's something like policy and program related, boom, let's talk about community stuff. Like what can we do to market ourselves in the community and develop a program within the community? If there's something sort of researchy, that's something too. So if I'm on the front end of stuff, then I'm like, oh, I have a perfect opportunity for that too, because I'm looking to see, what the percentage of residents in my neighborhood are that are, whatever, below the
Can I
poverty
just say, like, I love watching your mind work.
Yeah.
I think so. Really, you mentioned
Thank
that,
you.
really how you're put together to be a really good fit for students.
I
But I can
try.
totally see how you're constantly trying to match up what's going on your
Yeah.
your upcoming task list, projects and things, and how it fits into the students. It's all just kind of
hmm
sounds very utopia to me. Like,
Yeah.
oh
Well, I
wow.
mean, okay. So I probably go above and beyond. I would say sometimes, like a lot of people give me feedback that I'm very organized. I give a lot. But what's the point? Like, why do I have interns, right? I'm not like, again, they're not there to be my employees. And I've also, like I said, I've learned from my own experiences and things where I'm like, this didn't teach me at all of what I need to learn in my domain to pass my RD exam. So even on the things that I do with the one-on-one counseling sessions, I'll have them observe that. Or if they can't observe that, we'll pull up the EHR and we'll go through like for your people who are watching this, I'm sure the ADIME and the PES statements. Like I'll teach them what I'm doing and I'll ask their input for stuff. So I'm always trying to make sure there's a component in there that is beneficial to them and that what they're doing isn't just time wasting, because that's just silly for me anyway. I mean, we're not getting paid for this. I mean, we get 15, I think we get 15 credits per whatever year. And, you get 8 credits for taking the training. But it just feels like it shouldn't just be a plug and play type of deal. Like you should have a purpose for when you're bringing people into your world and what you can do to help educate them, nurture them, empower them to move on to be your future colleague, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So you had some things that you wanted to share, but I want to go back a little bit to
Yeah.
paperwork and, when you work for an institution,
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes they have paperwork, these affiliation agreements. Of
Yes.
course, we have the rotation or objectives, but there's this other kind of paperwork that you need in place. Maybe can you break that down just a little bit and what you've seen in
Yeah.
your
Yeah,
experience?
it's not much different. So, depending on who you are, if you're just an individual person, private practitioner, whatever, you're still an entity. You're just not maybe an agency that has, multiple layers of staff and so on. So you're still given an affiliation agreement by the director. Usually, I think it's like good for a while. They don't usually ask you to update it every single second. That every time you get a new intern, you will also get the resume. Hopefully, so that's paperwork also that you have to make sure you're tracking as well. Time logs and so on. Depending on if you're getting the intern from whatever program, they might send you a couple of links or paperwork to fill out for like a midpoint evaluation and a final eval. And that's something that you want to look at beforehand to make sure not only for the competencies, but that you're keeping track of what you're evaluating this person on, so that it's not a surprise to either of you where you go, oh, whoops, like we forgot to do something that can check that off. And making sure too, so in the case of the actual training, the preceptor training, that can take a very long time. That's like an 8-module course, and they want you to be interactive of it. So if you're not, for me, I had leadership skills, management skills. I'm very comfortable with overseeing staff in my previous jobs. For other people who are straight out the gate or kind of like being thrown into the preceptor world, it's not, I mean, it's supposed to be a mandatory training, but I don't think anybody's ever asked me for the certificate, except for maybe a few of these programs. So I would definitely say take that into consideration too, because you get a certificate from that as well. You get to look up, how to work with diverse personalities, what to do to handle conflict. So this is very helpful for people who've never been in that role before. And there's a whole forum where you can then share with people who've been in that process and learn that as well. I'm trying to see what else I wrote down on here too, as far as like paperwork and stuff. But yeah, so forms wise, handbooks. So the program either online or themselves might send you a handbook just so you can also see what the student entails and what the intern is going through. So they might have to have set time that they're off site. So they're not going to be working with you, and that may or may not be included in the hours for their rotation. So, if they have to be like mandatorily going to school on certain days or whatever programs that they're going to that.
So we have a question from
Yeah.
Monica, and I think she's very maybe similar to you.
Yeah.
And advice for a dietitian entrepreneur taking her first student next week. Yay!
Congratulations, Monica.
Yes, kind of this feeling of I do a little bit of everything, right? Like one day I'm doing this, and one day I'm doing that, and that might feel, especially if you're taking an intern, like, how do I layer on a student on top of that? And Monica, you can say if I'm kind of capturing that. Just
right.
Any tips or advice for someone who, does a little bit of everything in their
Yeah,
week?
well, it would depend on what you're doing, like what the actual things are that you're doing. If it's front end, back end, like if you're actually starting the process of creating something, or you're actually executing something, and in which case, where would you plug that person in? And then making sure obviously you're cross-referencing their competencies to check that off. Do you want me to share my schedule and screen? Okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
So let me pull this up for you guys, just so you can kind of see what I'm going to talk. Oh, hold on. I'm actually going to stop this for a second and share something else, because I think I have where would I get, sorry, hold on one second here. Sorry, Megan.
With like 12 screens. I just have 95 things open at the same time.
I was going to say, I'm going to assume it's probably in here. Hold on one second. There's my rotations. Okay. Can you see this thing that says description of supervised practice, or no? Is that what you're seeing right now?
No, I'm seeing education handouts still.
Education handouts. Okay. Hold on one second. All right. So I might have to stop sharing this just to cue this up. So I have
Tell us about what you're
schedule. So I'm going to show you a schedule, which hopefully this is going to come up now. I have a schedule that I've created for myself, and there we go. Okay, let me share that. I have a schedule that I created for myself. So this is, can you see this here with the letterhead on that? Okay, so this is what I created, which are potential, like currently, this is kind of what I'm doing right now, Monday through Friday, volunteer/intern tasks and assignments, and then like every day what I'm doing, right? What I'm about doing. So on the days that I'm working on website stuff, or some days that I'm working on materials for whatever my next corporate wellness or community wellness thing is going to happen. And then at the end of the week, I try my best to do reviews and like, SWOT analysis, where you're looking back and looking looking to see what challenges, et cetera. There's some marketing things on here. So all of these little bulleted points then correspond in some way to what the domains are. So this took a lot of time. So
this
in
is
Monica's,
brilliant.
yeah. So in Monica's case, I mean, if Monica knows, kind of like what her schedule at a glance looks like, and then you can cross-reference either with the intern's competencies or plug in on your own. So you have something like I do. This is like a standard thing that I just email to all the directors of like, hey, if you want to send people my way, this is what I could potentially do. Because again, right, this is like apply evidence-based guidelines. I mean, you're doing that no matter who you're talking to, hopefully, in this field. So some things are a little bit.
You're creating a nutrition handout. You're doing
exactly. So you go through domain 4, et cetera. Like, what could I possibly do when I do food demos? Does that meet a food service thing? Maybe, like it depends on how strict or how conservative or how liberal the director's program is. So it's possible you can do stuff like that. So that might be something helpful just to kind of get a bird's eye view of what you're looking at. Let's see, can you see me again here? Okay.
Yes.
So I think for me, like I said, that took some time to do, but it's very helpful because then I can say this satisfies those goals. And if your competency sheet comes to me and I can't match those two things, then we might not be right for each other.
I think you kind of can put that onto the front end.
Yeah.
Because nothing's more uncomfortable than you trying to create something that doesn't really exist.
Right.
That it would have been such a better thing to kind of have figured that out before you said yes to the student. So I really can imagine that did take a lot of time to put together, but I can also see how much value it adds for you to have.
I mean, I know that the majority of us tend to be type A and we like doing everything ourselves, but this really gives you an opportunity to delegate and then manage and then evaluate. And then you're teaching the person who's working with you as the intern to do that thing as well. Like, this is what and giving feedback, right? Like, this is not what I was looking for. And here's what I am looking for. And this is what I'd like to see better next time or different next time. Or maybe I wasn't clear with my instruction, so let's get better at communicating. But yeah, I mean, like, by all means, if you can front end that, don't walk into it without not knowing really what you're getting into.
I think you made a really good word there, this whole delegation and, giving feedback and allowing people, you mentioned your history of managing employees. And I think this is a skill set, just like counseling clients or giving community presentations. It might not be something that is easy for you in the beginning, especially if you haven't done a lot of delegation. I spent more than 8 years in a supervisory role. There's no way you can survive without delegating to your team of 20 or 30 or however many people you have. But that's a process that you have to give yourself a little bit of space to learn how to do that well. That it might be hard at first.
Yeah, especially like we were saying, if you're a one-person show and you've never had like assistants or admin help or anyone else that's working in your practice with you, that it's weird to kind of let go of those reins. But it does give you also the opportunity to strengthen those managerial skills as well, which I think is important.
So you've kind of talked around this topic of the training that is offered that's worse than CEUs, and maybe you can share a little bit more about that and maybe how people can find it.
Yeah, I'm going to show. So here's again, I'm going to try and jump on here. There's a few different things. So, all right, let me get on here and share the screen. So the first thing I'm going to share with you, I believe is it's going to be the eatright.org site. So obviously you have to be a member of this. And this is can you see that right there, Megan?
Yeah, Eat Right. Okay. So this is Eat Right Pro.
Eat Right Pro. And it is, ASN training. You just Google like preceptors, find a preceptor or something. This is where you can put your name in, and this is also where people can find you.
So this is where you can, if you're interested in taking students,
right there,
you can put yourself on the list. Okay.
Yep. You sign yourself up, you put your profile in, you give as much bio as possible. There's a check box that says, I will accept students, I will not accept students at this time. And that there's also check boxes of what you think you might be able to qualify for. So this way you're, again, the student who's finding you doesn't reach out and says, I'm looking for clinical, when you're like, I'm clearly not clinical.
Oh, so this little page though is limited to Academy members.
Academy members.
But you could certainly reach out to, internship programs and things, even if you're not, or a student,
Exactly.
But this is a great place to go if you are an Academy member.
And like I said too, so if you do have something like that weekly schedule that I had, you could just, find, so let me show you this one too. So I'm going to open this tab. Can you see this tab with the applicant guide? Okay. So this is basically the entire like nationwide, if anybody's never seen this before, it's all of the dietetic internship programs in a PDF file, and it's updated every year or so. So if you live in a certain state, you could just click on these states or click on these, right here, these are hyperlinked, and you can find the most current updated email address for the internship director, and then do a blast with an attachment like I had with that weekly, schedule, and say, hey, I'm open for whatever. I'm not an academy member, but I am open to precept, and here's what I can offer.
I love
So
that idea.
Kind of like number 2. I mean, you can also find some of these on the drop-down menus from the Eat Right site, but I feel like
this 640-page document love it, is available on that Academy eatright.org pro.
No, you just type in applicant guide to supervised practice in the Google search bar, and this giant thing will pop up.
So I got it. You can find it online.
Yep, you can find it online. Yep.
It lives on a server somewhere, so you can get to it.
Yeah, I'm happy. And you know what? It's actually sent through the NDEP, so the nutrition and dietetic educators and preceptors, which again, if you are an academy member and you are part of this program, that's also a very useful tool to have, because you can share resources and how-tos and best practices with this group as well. So I actually do belong to these guys as well.
Nice.
So, and here's their little website.
So that's
the academy thing too, right?
Practice groups are where it's at.
Yeah, that's kind of the workaround. So even if you're, again, no offense to the NDEP people, but even if you're not an academy member, you can access this giant document, or you can look up, internship programs.
It's nice that it's sorted by state.
Yep.
If you're looking for people who might be in the area. While virtual is nice, it doesn't mean that just because someone is located a few miles from you, it doesn't mean you always have to be in person. You can still do some, virtual, but it is nice to be able to see people in person.
Exactly. And then the last thing I wanted to share with you too. So one, again, if you are an academy member, you can go onto the Commission of Dietetic Registration, and there is an online dietetics preceptor training, which is free of charge to you. And it's actually 8 credits for you to put onto your activity log. So you can take the training and claim 8 credits. And then as a preceptor, you can also claim, I believe, what is up to 15 CPUs per 5-year cycle. So, you don't get to kind of like regenerate for every intern you get, but it's significant. So you click on this thing and you sign up to do these like 8 modules and things and so on. And it's a whole course, and it comes with forums. It's a little time consuming, as I said, but you do it at your own pace. And then, when you're done, they give you a certification of that. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you see me now here?
I can see you now.
Back again? Okay. Was that helpful?
Yes.
To kind of walk through?
It was very helpful to take you through. So I'm going to kind of recap for, people. I think, as I'm listening in, all of this can feel a little bit, I don't know, not going to say overwhelming, but that there's a lot of process and systems. And I think a few important points here of, one, putting together, especially if you're someone who has a bit of a diverse schedule. It's not like you show up at a clinic or you show up at your office. I don't know many entrepreneurs who are like, every day, all day, I do X, Y, or Z. None of us became entrepreneurs because that's how we work.
Right.
So every day is going to look a little bit different. But that if you can create some kind of a outline of a general week, given that some weeks might be different, you probably have some degree of structure, that then you can translate those big bucket things you're doing on a regular recurring basis, whether it's, creating a new community program, the topic might change, but in general, these are things you do. If it's a TV segment like Monica, you're probably going to do another TV segment, but you can put that block in and then translate that into the objectives. So where do you get those objectives? I think that's something that maybe I didn't ask you.
Okay, so let me share that with you as well. Hold on, I'm going to pull this up on screen here. So this is just an example of one of the rotations that hang on one sec. Let me do my...
You're just such a treasure trove of information.
No, can I just tell you, this is what takes up 98% of my day is people going, go to Dina. She knows everything. She knows what So this is, I'm going to steal this from one of our...
Because you get tagged all the time in a post. Just Dina.
Just go see Dina. So can you see what I'm showing you now here, the description? Okay, so this is one example. So you have community, public health elective, 370 hours. I might only get, say, 90 hours out of this or whatever is assigned to me for this person. And then here are the competencies. So this is where you're kind of picking and choosing. And the programs will give, again, these are suggested experiences. Nothing here says they have to meet some exact thing of doing probably more so in clinical where, you have to maybe do X amount of tube feedings or something like that. But here it's a little bit more flexible. So they write for you. This is part of their handbook. And this is given to you as a preceptor, hopefully by the student or the director themselves. And
So
then
that's the handbook that you mentioned, the
yeah,
internship
this is
program. Okay.
right. This comes out of the descriptions, so there's like one of these for the food service rotation. There's one of these for the community, et cetera, et cetera.
So this is a really nice thing if you're looking at that list of
Yeah.
potential programs. You might reach out and say, hey, I'm thinking about taking students. Would you mind sending me your handbook so I can take a look to see if maybe it might be a good fit?
Exactly.
Nice.
Now, if I can share with you one more thing, because at the higher level, even if you didn't get contacted by anybody, but you are, even if you're not an academy member, can you see this here, the CDR?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So like you have to use this for yourself when you're doing the CEUs and stuff. This is the competencies that you're also creating for yourself for these like performance, indicators and so on. So this also kind of cross-references different competencies that are used in the internship depending on what you're doing. So if you're a research person or a food service person, or you can implement leadership and, whatever these things are, they're somewhat related to the competencies that are pulled out of this into the into the rotations.
Naturally, there's a lot of overlap, right?
Yes, right. But you don't necessarily have to wait for a program to tell you what they offer. You can go and kind of search in there and take a look. And again, if you're a super nerd like me that likes to have everything out there, because also it helps the intern. The intern's like, oh, thank goodness, because I have no frame of reference for what it is that you're teaching me or what I'm going to be doing. Right. And like I said, oftentimes it really bums me out. Like I'm trying to advocate for this holy trinity that I keep saying, the preceptor, the intern, and the dietetic internship director, or the preceptor, the student volunteer, and the supervisory role that goes off site. There has to be that nice cohesive, I'm giving you something so you can go back and tell people you had a great experience and we all work as this nice structure.
Yeah. That's really, I love the triangle that you're describing because it really is.
Yeah.
They all need to be there or it's probably not going to be a great, a great situation. So before we run out of time, I want to ask you, kind of tips in general. I think some of us have this fear or can I really be a good intern? You mentioned at the outset, I didn't have enough years under my, my belt and kind of tips for being a good, if we want to say it, preceptor. Like what are some things that you think are just top priority that really, interns benefit from? Like what do you think?
Compassion, knowing that you've been there too and you know what they've gone through. I'm not an advocate of like the tough love thing, like just because I, had to run through this ringer that I now pass that along because that's abusive to me. So compassion for sure. The mere ability of just being of service to something, that is a voluntary role that you're doing there. So, it kind of checks the boxes of like, oh, I'm, this philanthropist now as well. And also the encouragement of knowing that these, as I said before, these are going to be your future colleagues. I joke about, when I'm 70, I might need like a little part-time gig and all my interns are going to be 20 years in. I'll be like, can you give me a side job? So you never know really how people are going to cross paths and what's going to be down the line for you in some way. So, keeping that in the back of your head as well. So aside from, yes, structure, organization, being comfortable with delegating, knowing yourself as well. Like, again, are you good at resolving conflict? How are you when you do have a difficult person? Making sure that you can preemptively perhaps meet and discuss what expectations are. Like I put everybody through a whole orientation and everything. This is what we're doing. This is what I'm doing. This is my background. This is what, et cetera, et cetera. So I treat it as if I were
You mentioned a very important word. We didn't even dive into this whole idea of orienting a new intern. I really think I could just like put you on retainer for a whole week.
Do whatever you want.
Like I'm taking a new intern. Here's Dina's boot camp on precepting. But
I'm not making this up. I was going to actually write like a little how-to guide. Yeah.
You really should. That thing you made with your crosswalk of your week and like the competencies is really would be such a helpful resource, I think, for people who sometimes just need to see an example and then it's like, maybe I'm just highly visual, but for me, it makes it so much easier when I can see an example.
Yeah, and if only there was a marketplace that could potentially distribute some of these materials.
Then we could share tools that help each other.
I wonder.
No, I wish we had that. Oh my gosh, I created it. Oh, I'm kidding. Yes. It's such a nice, like,
Oh,
kick out right there.
thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Well, I just hate that we're running out of time, but I know your
Yeah,
tight
I have a
schedule.
few more minutes if you need. I actually, can I jump in with one thing? I
Yes.
wrote a note for myself on here because again, going back to just like what can you offer and thinking also in the sense of what did we not really learn from school, right? Like I do think it might be changing a little bit now, but we definitely don't have a lot of counseling experience. That comes up a lot. So if you have the ability to do one-on-one patient or client counseling in whatever way you do, I have clients and I also have patients. My interns come with me to see my patients, but they don't come with me to see my clients. But as I said before, I still create charts and I share them, the A dimes and the PES statements with them, but to actually see and learn and understand like how you go about role playing that. That's very, very helpful because I got like, one semester and that's it. And then the rest of it, I kind of paid to learn workshops and I'm sort of
Do the
teaching it.
internship programs provide you with like the confidentiality agreements? Like the students already have to sign those, or something you give to them?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Usually the facility will do it. So in my outpatient clinic that I work with the doctor's office, they have a confidentiality form, so
Got it.
we can view medical health records. And then
Correct.
for me, I have like a standard HIPAA template thing that I just have people sign off on.
Okay.
Especially when we're looking at stuff like that. But I definitely feel like if you have the ability to do it, in other words, don't take an intern in if all you're doing is one-on-one counseling in private practice, and then don't let them sit in on that in some way, like just have them work on newsletters or something. I feel like it's a huge waste of opportunity, and it's a little unfair that that's all that they're doing, because again, we're trying to prepare them for the RD exam. That's not helpful to work on some of these
Right.
things. Not that it's, not that, of course everything has a role, but just like think of what it is that you can offer, or just don't take, wait until you can offer something before saying yes to.
That's really, I appreciate that you made that point. So how can
Yeah.
people connect with you? Not bombard your email, but where can people find you
Oh,
if they want to
everywhere.
follow you?
I'm only known as Dish with Dina in the entire universe. I swear, Megan, every time some other stupid app or like whatever else new thing comes out, I'm like, I just grab the profile name and I'm securing everything. So I'm quite literally everywhere, even if I'm not technically on it. I'm on it. Yeah. Yes. Dish with Dina, wherever you go, you'll find me.
I love that. Yeah. And also dishwithdina.com.
.com. It's sort of under construction right now. I'm trying to.
Aren't we all? I feel like as any website ever, like everyone's like, I'm working on my website. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, see, this is something too, like don't let yourself wait until things are perfect to do something. Like I'm a hot mess 90% of the time, but I'm also learning as I go. And I think it's a great opportunity to have interns that have that flexibility to watch this happen, that they get the business side of things, or like, it doesn't have to be this traditional role all the time. And I can maybe spin that in that way too, or there's a lot of opportunities that come in. So I think that's something that a lot of people will just say, I'm not ready. Just do it. Just do it and you'll figure it out. And yeah.
That's a really good point, because we're not, I'm not ready yet. And I think
nobody's ready. Nobody's ever ready.
Well, this was really helpful. Thanks for sharing the resources as well as what you use in your own practice. And I think really your passion for taking students is just undeniable. And it personally is, inspiring. It's something that I'm just like you. I'm a hot mess. Like I'm still working on stuff, and but I have so many opportunities within RD2RD from a technology and element and some other things that I just need to rip the Band-Aid off and do it. And I feel so inspired from what you shared today, and that,
I hope programs are also seeing that too. Like we're not just the standard cookie cutter thing anymore. Like there's a lot of this new
dietitians can do more than just
tons.
one-to-one counseling and client visits in a hospital. I think
give everyone an opportunity. Come see the other side of things.
This is great. Well, thank you again for being here. And I know this will be an incredibly useful video to share when people have questions about what resources and how do I find students and the process. I think this is going to be definitely one that will get some traffic.
I appreciate it. And thank you for the opportunity for letting me share all this with you as well. And keep in touch.
Yes, I certainly will.
We will.
Dina, thank you again. Everyone, you can find Dina D'Alessandro at Dish with Dina everywhere.
Everywhere.
Go follow her, and just, thanks for being an advocate for precepting.
Absolutely.
Really admire that.
Yeah, pay it forward, everybody.
Yeah.
If you like what you hear, pay it forward. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.